Welcome back to the show, guys. So, I kind of want to talk about ego-focused posting when it comes to like business. So, as we go through our career, there's a lot of transitions that start to happen, especially in that very early first 5 years or so. And around the time I was in college, so for just a brief bit of context, I had an entrepreneurial mind, but it was a little bit different than I think what most people think of. Most people, when they talk about, how when they were younger, sorry, I'm checking outside, make sure it's not raining. I left the sunroof open. Um, Most people, when they're younger, they talk about how they sold candy or they bought, something for like $1 and then they turned around and sold it for $2 or $3. I never understood that as a child. I didn't figure that part out. When I say I was entrepreneurial as a kid, I worked. I did manual labor. I exchanged time for money, which a lot of the people in the United States is stupid and all this stuff and yada yada yada. But I was 12, and at 12, the internet wasn't quite also what it is today either. There wasn't a lot of. So when I was 12, this would have been like 2000. So 10 would be 2004, 2005. So it'd be about 2006. And at the time, Facebook wasn't it was a thing, but it was only for colleges, and I was in sixth grade. So a lot of the internet, and a lot of the information that we have now about the accessibility to it in terms of like scaling and arbitrage and like this like Gary Vee type stuff wasn't quite there. YouTube was, I think, just turning 2 years old, because I think YouTube was started in 2004. So I didn't understand that. So I used manual labor. But when it goes to college, we started a drone company. And at that time, I went through a breakup. And the drone company, we really didn't have a lot going on for us. And that's a whole other podcast. I'll talk about the struggles we had and the mistakes I made and the time I wasted, the money I wasted, and the lessons I learned to help save you, because that's a whole, I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole. But what I want to talk about was ego-focused posting. And when I went through this breakup, we started this drone company. And I somewhat did it out of spite. You know, this relationship didn't work. I want to become like a multimillionaire and kind of prove it to you what you missed out on. That was my thought process at the time. This is like 2015 or 2016. And I posted a ton on Facebook and Instagram. Both accounts are no longer in existence. I have a Facebook and I have an Instagram, but they were recreated within the last 2 years or so of me making this podcast episode. So those accounts are restarted, I think, in 2021, 2022, somewhere in there. And a lot of the posts were very just ego focused and trying to make things seem like they were bigger and more successful than what they were. I posted when I would go to these random meetings that really didn't have a whole lot of like benefit. There was nothing really tangible coming from it. There was no action items from it. It was more of just like, oh, I went down to the city of Akron, Ohio, and had a meeting with this chief engineer or head engineer. And on the outside, people don't know. It's just what you're posting and what you're showing. But on the inside, it's like there was nothing really coming from it. We still had a lot of technology developed. We still had a lot to prove. And it just kind of never really went anywhere. It kind of just fell apart. And I don't think at the time those people necessarily took me as a person seriously either. But nonetheless, a lot of the posting that I made was very ego focused and egocentric. Because when you're first starting out in business, you don't have much to go on. You're constantly trying to prove yourself. And one of the ways, as I think as a younger person, you just try to prove it through social media and this perception that you paint. And I don't know what people did before social media when they did ego-based business. Because I think a lot of times when you first start a business, it's very ego-driven. Someone says you can't do it. You want to prove something to somebody. You want to become wealthy to get back at something. I think that's what a lot of people start for. And like fitness, a lot of my personal experience has been a lot of people start because they were out of shape or they lost something or someone because of their physical appearance and they want to get back at that person. That might not be their entire motivation that carries them throughout the whole journey, but it's definitely a big part of them getting started. And this was the case for business for myself. But I don't know what people did before social media existed. I wasn't around, no idea. But nonetheless, this was the center of the posting. And I think I wasted a lot of time and effort and energy. And the main reason why one of the reasons why I deleted those accounts, because a lot of the stuff I wrote was just stuff that the old version of me looked back at. I was like, this is like, I don't even know, this stuff is ridiculous. And it's, somewhat embarrassing. The image that was painted, I tried to paint or portray, was kind of ridiculous. And instead of focusing my efforts on actions that would actually create a business or a viable business, I would focus on these posts and I would make this vlog. I think the vlog was called The Build. And I would try and do it every day. And it took time. I mean, it took roughly, these were not high quality vlogs. I mean, I'm not saying this was like a Casey Neistat level of editing. But, I would film these vlogs and they take about, like 30 minutes to an hour to edit each day. And I made 200 of them, 300 of them. Those are still on YouTube. Those still exist. I've never taken those down, and I probably won't. But it just goes to show you just the ridiculousness of what it was and what was going on. And I think time was better spent not doing that. And it's very hard to get sucked into. And the ironic part is, as I've learned and as I progressed in my career, the results now are much more real, much more tangible, and much more evident than they were back then. But my desire to necessarily post constantly about them is perhaps a little bit less. And I think that's just one of the interesting dynamics in the world of social media, where everybody's constantly sharing everything, is perhaps you don't need to be as concerned with the people that are constantly posting their life and their successes and they're trying to constantly brag via the internet. The people that are constantly making the most noise, well, I'm sure there's people out there that make a lot of noise and can execute. I think the majority are in a spot where I was in 3-4 years ago, and they're not really executing. They're just trying to make it look like it because it boosts their own ego. That's really the only thing it does. When people comment or they like it, it boosts your ego. But they're not really producing any tangible results. Whereas as you start to produce tangible results, it really doesn't matter if you like the post or if you comment on it or if somebody gives you some validation, because you know that you're doing the things necessary to get the results that you want. And so the people that are the more quiet people, in my opinion, this is just an opinion, are the ones that execute more and better because they don't need that validation. They're getting it through their actions. They're getting it through their tasks completed. They're getting it through the results that they produce. Whereas the people that are louder aren't doing that. They're not the ones to necessarily be concerned about it. In a world where people want to share everything and post about everything and talk about everything, you should be more concerned with the people that can stay quiet and just execute on the work. I think this is one of the lessons that I learned earlier, and I wish I just would have spent less time on social media and less time worrying about it. But I think it's a phase you just go through. And if it's a phase that you can skip over, then I've done my job in this podcast or in this talk. If you go through it and you want to learn it the hard way, by all means, but looking back, this is my opinion of where I sit today, looking back at things that I did 2, 3, 4 years ago that perhaps weren't the best use of my time.